and indigenous peoples who work on international forest policy issues, policymakers, international delegates that expecting any compensation for it because it's already the mandate of the Convention Forest, developed countries and developing countries, so they can turn around with negotiations about money. They should start right away.
Why are they trying to tie it to money?
Developing countries we are supposed to give the opportunity to polluters a small fee for forest conservation, for instance, to developing CO2 in this case, and increasing the problems of greenhouse gases. My organization is a global organization. We work with people in Indonesia, in Malaysia, a country that in the 1950s had some 9 million, or comparable to the Congo forest. Now we have about 700,000 hectares of that in small patches. And now at the moment to grow soybeans, mainly to grow soybeans. The soybeans are used, so that's why the meat over there is so good. But in any case, the pigs and the chicken of Europe and China have to eat something, and that's soybeans. Really rich forest habitats for jaguars, tapirs, harpy eagles, and indigenous peoples. The farming of those areas. So at the moment, the indigenous population there is minimal. I would guess that it doesn't surpass the 100,000 people in all those forests, and we're talking an area the size of, let's say, half of wheat rotation, soybeans, corn. That's a business.
In the area that used to have forest?
Yes. Yeah, that's in some soils, you have some types of soils that are very, let's say, strong. They can be fertile for a number of years after the forest is cleared, and those are the ones in eastern Paraguay, southern Brazil, southwest Brazil, northern Argentina,